he's good to go.
Okay. All right, well, I will call this meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. Nice to have everybody in the same room. We do have 2 seats open here. If the accountant and the superintendent want to come join us.
I'm good.
You're good?
Definitely.
What's that? I missed it. I want to
She
ask
said antisocial.
yeah. Okay. So everybody knows everybody here? Do you know everybody here?
Not all the names specifically yet, we'll get there.
All right. I guess the first order of business would be to ask the Finance Committee Chair for his review of the budget and some recommendations he may have at this time.
Okay. So as projected, behind it, you may want to turn to see, oh, you can see me. We could cheat. So these are the various departments, the select board. Proposed budget is 497. The difference from 25 to 26 is 99,000. Primarily, the 90,000 is the town administrator, because as you know, that was part of the 300,000 from the ARPA fund, so that gets flowed through. The other is insurance is going up. In the budget, we have about 5,000. I fear that we may be looking at something more. And the other is the additional cost for street lighting for about $9,000. So I don't know if we have any changes in that in the future, but that's what's reported so far. FinCom, last year, when I first joined FinCom, we had a reserve of 150,000. By the end of last year, we had reduced that reserve to 15,000. When we got free cash in October, we added another 20,000 to the budget, so we have 35,000 for this year, and we're going to keep it at 35,000 until maybe we take, depending upon what free cash comes in. The accountant, treasurer, assessors are increases in there for the assessor. We're going through every 4 years we have to do a revaluation, and next year is property revaluation. So there's a cost of probably about 9,000 in there that's associated with the firm that has to come in from outside to do it. Benefit costs. Again, group insurance is going up approximately 16% overall, but since group insurance itself is a moving target, we never really know, as people come in and people go out, they're not necessarily in our insurance program or they drop out. Let me go back on a couple of things. We have made a couple of changes, we're suggesting some changes. For the select board, for the past 2 years, the select board salary has not been paid. And it's, I think we're suggesting that we go a 3rd year without it, or maybe the 4th year, I don't know. Also in there was an adjustment to the town assistant's salary was going to go from 25 hours a week to 32. So we brought it back to 25. Since Ashley is not going to be with us. I think I have to be more clear here. So the adjustment to the assistant salary we reduced by $9,000. This was voted upon by FinCom, and it's recorded on the worksheet. Again, the elimination of the select board salary, and this was the dues and membership. We reduced that by $1,100 and brought it back to the $900 it was last year. FinCom, as I said, we put up the additional $3,000. Oh no, we took away the $2,000 for $200 for our membership in the Association of Finance Committee members. It's a good organization. It's part of the MMA, but since we're taking it away from the certain departments, we felt it's only right to take it away from our own department. The accountant has reduced the audit fee. The auditor agreed to keep it as it is for 2025. So we reduced by 1,700, excuse me. Police, we really haven't done anything yet. Fire, we need to speak to the chief. We have not done any of these, but for the past 2 or 3 years, he's had an open position for assistant chief position. Has never been filled, and we have managed 2-3 years without it. We're going to suggest that we just reduce that from their budget. They have increased electricity and heating costs by double the amount that we have for 2025. Again, they're operating in 2 buildings. When this was proposed early on in a couple of meetings, when a couple of people brought up the idea, all right, you know, all of your utility costs are going to be more expensive. And their argument was, this is the fire department. Well, it's new buildings practically. They're going to be highly efficient and so on. So if they are going to be highly efficient, let's bring it back to what they were at that point. The emergency squad. Now, I guess a couple of months ago, the squad presented to the select board, at that time it was just you and Brooke, and showed that they can no longer manage on the amounts of money that we are contributing in our contract. They had a very good presentation. They had a lot of information in there. It is a very difficult situation, not just North Brookfield, but a lot of the ambulance companies. I know East Brookfield is struggling. So they wanted an increase of $60,000, which at this point, based on our budget, it's very difficult to do that. But on the other hand, we need to support the ambulance. As a community, we have to have some sort of arrangement with an ambulance company. It doesn't have to be this particular one. You know, it could be any other one. But I don't think we're going to be saving any money. And we run the risk that the service is not in our town. And, you know, I'm not going to suggest that we go and hire a commercial company out of Worcester, and in an emergency, them having to come from Worcester to here. You know, that's not serving our people. So we're recommending maybe we could go back to them with an additional 40,000. We're hoping that there will be additional growth in the revenue for some of the new houses that are being built, and maybe that could offset that. So we had a lot of questions when they were here, and I then had a subsequent meeting with the treasurer of the Ambulance Association, and she's provided me with all the information I wanted, including their IRS reports. And, you know, as of this year, their fiscal year closes on March 31st. They had a loss of 60,000, so that's where that 60,000 is coming from. Highway, we're looking once again at we have to talk to them, the line painting. So we had 8,000 in the budget last year for line painting. We still have 5,000 left as of April. And they're wanting an additional 10,000. So our suggestion is possibly cutting that back to 5. You know, they still have to do a lot of paving, and whether they'll get to the line painting this year. Board of Health. So the Board of Health came in wanting to, like many departments in our operation here, hiring and keeping employees is challenging. We have 118 full-time employees, of which only 7 are not union or not on contract. So their salaries definitely needed to be adjusted. We went in and we did a comparison to other towns. It was quite a detailed comparison, and we came up with these adjustments. It's going to break the bank? No. What would break the operation is if these people leave. Besides working very hard, they have a lot of history. So the Board of Health raised their recycling monitor's salary to what they thought they could keep their people. It was rather high. We as a committee did not agree with it, and we're reducing the salaries that they asked for, what the committee asked for, by $76.70. Right now, we haven't had a clerk in the health department for a permanent one for a year and a half. And, you know, they come and go. So he wanted a $25 an hour they're getting 18, so he wanted to move it to 25, and we thought that was a bit much. And we kind of we're recommending 22,000. And then we have the school. which we'll get into a little later, but to bring it back to here. So those are, some of the costs are baked into these numbers, some are not. So the bottom line is, at this point, with the adjustments that we've made, and we are in a deficit of 1,132,031. And we're not sure how we get out of this. So we came back to, when you have such a loss like that, it's, and the school committee, or the, is coming in asking for 1.2 increase from the prior years. We can't do that.
Right.
This is a comparative of last year to this year. So we are looking at a difference from fiscal 25 of 1,183,000. It's broken out here, and you know, it's one of the things that we had looked at is that part of it is made up of just operating costs, and the difference there is an increase of 338,000. The bulk of the difference is through the offsets. So the offsets being what the government gives to us, what the state gives to us in various forms. Chapter 70, the circuit breaker for special ed. So last year, it was 2,398,000 was anticipated that we were going to get as offsets for this current year. The budget is now reflecting 1.552. So that's been a decrease of 847,000. And I know in our March meeting, I had pointed out these figures specifically in the special ed, and asked Tim, why has it decreased? And as of now, we still don't have an understanding why that has decreased to that amount. So that is, are we just having less students in special ed? Are we sending less kids out? From our initial discussion, it did not sound that this was the situation. So when I first started, you know, I've been chair for 2 of the 3 years that I'm on the committee. This is my final year, and when Jim and I started discussing the budget in January of last year, and I had the big budget book and went through it, I just said, okay, let's look at the school in different years. So I went back and said, what did it look like pre-pandemic, before the world changed? And this is what it had. Then I did 22, 23, and again 23, 24, and this is just a trailing to show how much the school budgets have increased. And you can see the various departments, and again, the critical one has always been pupil services, which is special ed. And I don't know how do we get around that. So the special ed, even though proposed is $3,015,000 compared to $2,840,000. Pretty decent increase, but yet again, as I was saying before, the offsets, meaning being reimbursed by the states, have decreased from $1,824,000 to $962,000. So these are variances that I think as a committee we certainly would like to look into further. And as an organization, I think we need to understand these numbers. But bottom line is, this town does not have the ability to support an increase of $1.2 million at the moment. And, you know, to give everybody history, especially the new board members, when we were talking about this before when I first came on the committee, and Mike was still the chair, and, you know, we met several times with Tim and went over it and understood the challenges that the school has. And we did talk about, you know, maybe we need to look into an override. And at that point, Mike did some back-of-the-envelope calculations. And his calculations, if my memory serves me correctly, I can't remember where it came from, but I remember numbers. And so to generate an extra $1 million, it would be a 14% increase. Okay. And depending upon what your property values were, your real estate taxes would increase in some portion substantially. And I went home and I calculated my own. And it calculated that I would have to pay an additional $1,000. And I said, okay. And I think I may even have mentioned it to Tim, or I know I mentioned it to Bob, a former highlight. And I said, you know what? If this would straighten out the school and put us on the right track, I'm good with it, right? At that time, my real estate tax burden was $6,400 a year. Now, if you ask me now, would I accept a $1,000 more increase? No, because my tax rate, my real estate is $8,200 now. And I could not afford the burden of another $1,000 with all the other increases. So, you know, at that time, it may have been the answer. I don't think it's the answer today. And there again, you know, I'm blessed, I'm fairly comfortable, so I could absorb this, and I believe that there's a lot of people who can't. So just as we as a finance committee tried to look at everything we could possibly do, whether, you know, from an override to, and we talked about cutting services. You know, how can we cut services? You know, look at the budget, you know, it's, get rid of half of the police department and all of the highway department. It still will not cover the 1.2 million. And, you know, so our hope is that we did try, or, you know, the group tried to regionalize, and that failed. But have we gone and looked at other possibilities? I mean, even when it failed, did it fail as a regionalization of the full school, full district? Or did anyone go back and say, okay, we could carve out something? Could we carve out the high school? And maybe they would talk about regionalizing with that. Now, I don't know the issues, and you know, those who had been on the committee. So we're at the point, we have to look at everything. And that's every department, every committee, and, you know, we just, we can't keep on going this way. Our revenue only increased so much. We have two big projects going on, and we don't know where that will lead us. You know, we have the sewer project. We don't know what the actual, we borrowed money, but until that is flowing, until there is a sign off by the federal government saying, okay, it's good, we don't know. And can we continue to start taking money, closing the budget, using anticipated free cash? No, because that's insane. I mean, that is so risky. The Department of Services have said that all along for years. We, you know, I believe years ago, or at some audit reports that the auditors say, that's dangerous. You know, it could only accumulate, so we can't do that. We can't really go and start taking monies from the stabilization. It's a stabilization. God forbid of something, we need to stabilize. If, you know, the federal government comes back and says, no, you need $2 more million, $3 more million worth of work on the sewer plant, and or else it has to be shut down. What are the residents going to do? You know, how are they going to? That's what stabilization is for, in my opinion. You know, should we be using it for operations? That's it. I'm done.
All right.
Enough preaching from an old man.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. So, did anybody have any questions for Joe or the Finance Committee? No?
So what is the deficit?
What's the deficit? 1,172,000.
What is it from? Is it,
Primarily from the school.
so that's just the school?
Primarily, yes. I think if we look at the budget and we could drill down, and maybe 100,000 is from
And that's based on projected numbers?
projected numbers, yes, that everybody has put their requests in. As I said, we began eliminating with our recommendations, and again, we could only recommend, you know, we can't do anything. And, you know, so, yeah, we could maybe chop it another 50.
I have a question. You said your personal property went from 6,400 to 8,200 within the last couple of years?
Yeah.
What was in town-wide, like, what was the reason for that increase? Because we haven't reevaluated, right? You said that was in next year?
No, they kind of reevaluate based on, one of the problems, it's not a problem, I live on Lake Lashaway. So we do have the highest tax rates in the town. And so when the assessors reassess, they actually go and they look at houses that have sold.
Correct, but you said that's not due till next year.
No, every year.
Oh, I think you said every 4 years earlier, I
Every
must have
4
missed.
years, now they're gonna do an actual, they're gonna come to your house and say, oh, now it's worth, 50,000 more or something like that. And that's what they're required to do every 4 years. And believe me, I'm not an expert on assessing. I usually don't open the door, but, so, yeah, it's, the finance committee is people who have been here a long time and who love this town, and, and love the school. And it's painful. It's painful when we have to go through these numbers. Kathy, what do we say most time when we're leaving? We're going home depressed, right? So anyhow, I'll shut up.
Anybody else have any questions for Joe? Anybody have any questions in the crowd? Raise your hand and for the finance committee. Okay. There were some statements made about an override. It had been brought up, it had been mentioned at several meetings here and there. And, we're more than willing to talk about what it means to have an override. But I don't think that with all the debt exclusions that we have, we don't know what they're coming to, we don't know what their end result is gonna be. I think it would be irresponsible to put an override on the warrant, especially considering the results of recent override votes. Because to Joe's point earlier, sewer's gonna go up. We don't know what the end is gonna be of this the buildings project with the fire and highway buildings, because there's probably gonna be extra costs there as well. So until those are done, we really can't know our impact on the tax base. Do you have anything to add? Or you, Ralph?
Not at this time. I mean, this town is crushed. It's being crushed with debt. Crushed. And unfortunately, the debt exclusions that we've taken out, like I said, there's a lot of uncertainty. I've heard some things about the sewer project that indicate it's has similar trajectory as the building projects. The building projects have certainly hit some pretty big hurdles. And as of right now, I can't tell you we're gonna get past them. And there's some very ugly decisions ahead. And decisions that are as a taxpayer, I'm not too happy about. But we are a poor town, making poor people decisions. The credit card is maxed out. In my particular situation, I'm comfortable. Can I afford it? Sure, I can afford it. It'd feel a whole lot better if it was a one-time deal, because I can afford it now. 10, 15, 20 years from now? I'm not gonna. And there is a large percentage of our town that is in that situation now. And, you know, since COVID, costs have gone up on everything, and you know, and with everything. And it gets to a point where, you know, if we're not looking out for, say, fixed income senior citizens, what happens? What happens to them? We're in a situation where, you know, we're asked to sacrifice one demographic for another, to some degree. And what's happened in the past couple of years is having a tremendous, a terrible effect on some of these folks. And I haven't heard anybody tell me any different. And the taxes have increased tremendously in the past couple of years. And to think that we can go back and ask for more. I mean, like I said, Spencer got shot down last night. And it didn't just lose. I mean, it got squashed. It was decimated. I mean, the people spoke. So, yeah,
Kathy?
Another thing that I say to Joe all the time, what do we do? What do we do?
Well, that's what we're here to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Ralph, you got anything?
I'm gonna hold off. I may have something after, but I'm gonna hold off for now.
All right. School committee?
Tough position to be in. You say we're crushing, the town's being crushed, but we also have to be so careful that we don't crush the education that these kids are getting. Because they are the town's future. If we crush so much of what they're getting, are they gonna stay here? Are they gonna raise their families here? Are they gonna be here to be the next generation to support the town? Or are they all gonna hit that age where they're starting to have their families and they leave?
Well, how many are choicing out already?
But looking back, where was the biggest piece of that? They get nervous when they hear these things, the regionalization and the happening and not happening. I think too, finding ways to bring them back is a huge piece that we need to be looking at too. And we
Okay.
can't afford to lose any more of them.
Well, I think you have 10 going, you got 10 that are choicing into 7th grade at Quabog next year. I mean, that's a huge hit. Right? How many are in the 7th grade? Or 6th grade rather, going into 7th? Yes, sir.
I'm not exactly sure about our 7th grade, but currently our 8th grade class has about 30. And the way that it looks right now, we're going down to 14 that are staying in North Brookfield next year. We're losing about 4 to Bay Path, and the rest are going to surrounding districts as Quabog, Quabbin, all the other ones.
Can you give those numbers one more time? I'm sorry.
So currently in our 8th grade, we have 30, and we're going down to 14. And I believe 4 are going to Bay Path.
There's no guarantee they all leave,
But
but that's the talk.
yes, as of right now, there's 14 that are sure they're staying, and the other 16 believe they're leaving.
Thank you.
Yep.
You guys have anything? No?
And the costs have been rising year over year. It's not anything new. So you know, the cost being higher this year shouldn't be a surprise, given that the state has these unfunded mandates, especially around special education. And when we have out-of-district tuitions to pay for, the state allowed quite an increase a couple of years back, and it's come down a bit, but it's still higher than it's ever been. So that's an additional burden on the budget when you have 1.7 to 1.8 million dollars for 13 students. That's a large percentage of the budget right there, and that's based on what the state allows these out-of-district schools to charge for tuition, and they allowed the bump, and so that's where there's a lot of cost driving there. And obviously, you know, you got salary increases and transportation costs. So those are the major drivers.
And one of the big things as far as offsets go is the ESSER funds. We don't have any more ESSER funds. We've been artificially floating the school for a couple of years now and warning repeatedly about that cliff. I think each of the last 2 to 3 years we've had a cliff warning from Mr. McCormick about the loss of that funding, which was COVID related, and how we were propping up different programs in the school with that money.
But that was temporary.
Yes.
That was temporary,
And we were cautioning against that for the entire time. Everyone started, except for this year, because now we don't have it
We
anymore.
don't have any.
But it said, there is a fiscal cliff coming. Here is what it is. This is the money. One year it was $700,000, I think, was a part of the budget from ESSER funds.
Right, because you had the 1 year where it was $585,000. But again, the ESSER funds were put into place only for temporary enhancements to the school, that they were not everlasting.
Yes.
So it should have gone away when the money's gone away.
And it
So-
did.
That's what we're saying.
And and now we're saying, in order to keep a level budget, this is what we're looking for. And I don't know what we're gonna solve here at this table, because we need to go line by line through this giant book of things and figure out what we can cut, because that's where we are.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the reality of the situation right now. We've been cautioning about this for years. We've seen it coming. It's not, I mean, we just had teacher negotiations, and I thought they went pretty well. They weren't asking for the world. It's not like we're giving them 25% raises and unlimited vacation days and things. It's not anything like that. They knew the budget constraints the town had.
But you said that there was the cliff, so the 500,000 that came in, where did it go? It should have only gone to programs that at the end of that year, or at the end of the 3-year program, should go away. So if you went in there and hired a teacher from the ESSER money, that teacher should have just been temporary. So, I know.
Well, I have this year's book. I don't have the previous year's book, but I could go find them, because there were rules as to where that money could go.
Right.
Exactly.
And all of those rules were followed, and some of them were ABA, paraprofessionals, things like that, that helped the kids kind of come back into school. That allowed us to prop up the staff and avoid additional school choice, or not even school choicing, but additional placements out of district, because you have that extra support staff that keeps the kids in the district.
So, but that was for a period of time.
It was for a period of time,
Not everlasting.
and now that period of time has ended, and we are saying,
then
this is
still
what it
there.
costs, we are saying, this is what it costs to keep this going. If you are saying we need to sunset all of the things we funded with that, then that's a conversation we can have. And we can come back and we can say, here is what we are cutting because the ESSER funds are out. What we're saying right now is that the school is running pretty well, and the kids are getting a decent education there, and we have the minimum number of extracurriculars and services and things like that that keep kids in the school. But those are always the first things to go, and then we lose additional kids. If that's the plan, we can do that, but we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to put the numbers forward. The whole purpose of this conversation is to say, this is what the school needs to keep running the way it's running. And then you tell us, we cannot give you that, you need to come down to this number, and then we will say, okay, we will come down to this number, this is what we were losing. And we have to say that publicly, we have to sign off on it, and then all of us are on the hook for that. So that's part of this conversation, which we are not going to solve at this table sitting here right now. There's a lot of stuff in this book that we have to go through with Mr. McCormick, who's already working on this. We already cut $300,000 at the last school committee meeting.
377.
$377,000 at the last school committee meeting. So right now, those numbers have come down. And that was just the stuff that would have been easily cut without impacting programs. That was our first step. Here's $377,000 back off of the budget.
And we've already condensed some of the services. We already have shared teachers between the two schools. Art and music are shared. Actually, sorry, art is shared. We have people working multiple roles in the district. So there's already consolidation and cost savings going on. It's not like, you know, money's flying out the window at nothing. So I just want that to be clear. And yeah, if we cut more, it'll seriously impact the quality of education of the school.
Michelle?
Michelle Petraeus. I did serve on this committee for the regionalization for all 5 or 6 years that it was going on. And I also know that we as a town were approached in January with the opportunity to do a tuition agreement. And I'm still not sure why this has not been considered, why it's not being discussed, and why we're talking about a sinking ship that's going to go into receivership instead of giving our children a better education at a neighboring school where everybody was okay with this school when we were talking about regionalization, and now all of a sudden we don't want to have a conversation with them about tuitioning because they didn't accept us as a regional school district, which is ridiculous. That was a financial thing. So now we have a better option that we are just tabling and not talking about. And my taxes have gone up 36% since 2021. My income has not gone up 36%, I can tell you that, nor has my family's income. So I'm not able to absorb any more of this either. And I want to know from the school committee, why are you not discussing it? Why is it not being seriously considered?
I'm new here, so I wasn't here to answer your from January part, so I can't speak to that, so I have no idea. One of these three can answer it, two, sorry, Dan's not here. But I think there's two separate conversations going on here. I think you didn't mention any, this is not a personal attack, but you didn't mention anything about the kids and what they're gonna, you know, we're just talking money. And that's, we have to,
No, I'm
we're
talking
an
about
organization,
programs.
we're busy.
No, they're a great school. Everybody thought they were a great school when they wanted to
I'll-
regionalize. The programs are great for the kids.
I'll let her
The
speak.
kids
She's
that
not gonna let me
have
speak.
gone there are thriving.
I'm done. Nope. I had a lot more to say, but she was more important, so.
No, you said I wasn't addressing both sides, and I did. So please finish.
So
Mr.
what I was going to say, Michelle, is that I think the big picture needs to be looked at. I don't know any conversations that's happened before tonight about tuitioning out with the committee. I haven't been there. I think it does need to happen. I think a lot of people on this committee would agree long-term, everything needs to be looked at. You can't close the door on anything. However, to get to next year, to disrupt families, I mean, there's a lot of things at stake. I personally don't think, I mean, I would be willing to discuss it. I don't think, why wouldn't you? But there's a lot of things to be asked. There's a lot of things to look into, is what I'm saying. All the problems we're in right now have come from a long time of issues. Not just this current administration, not just this current school committee. It comes from select board decisions, FinCom decisions, everything over the last 20 or 30 years. So to make a decision from one year to the next, just to say we're gonna do it, just to maybe save some money, which we don't have the whole picture yet, which we should look into, I agree. But I think we need to focus on two different things. We need to focus on how do we get to next year, and then we can form a committee and look at the big picture. Because I want to know what's going to happen in 10 years from now. I don't care about just next year. I think the town's been operating like that for a long time. How do we get to next year? How do we get to next year? How do we get to next year? We need to look at 10, 20, 30 years from now. And I think it would be very silly to make a decision that quick because we got an offer from a district who wouldn't accept us in regionalization, who now says they want us, because it is gonna benefit them. I mean, a lot of districts right now are looking for students. So we shouldn't just be going to one district either, if that's the thing. We really need to look into this. That's my opinion on it, but I have no answer as to why it hasn't been talked about, if it hasn't been talked about, but we can forget about that, because we're in May, and it's done,
So
so.
it's not done.
It is.
No, what I'm saying is, why haven't we talked about it? It's done. We're here. We have a new,
It's not a not option still. It's still an option today. It's an option through Friday. And if we had been having this conversation from January, we
But we
would have
didn't.
had another 5 months worth of preparing everybody. And this school, honestly, has been talking for 5 years about sending these kids to Quabog for the whole entire time. I don't know why this is a shock to people. Like, did nobody think that that was a possibility? It was a possibility. These kids could be regionalized there next year, and what would the answer be then?
No.
Oh, we're all mad
it's
now
not
that-
regionalization. I mean, so tuition out's
But
different
if it
than
had been-
regionalization. That's what we have to look at too. There's things that go along with that. I was for regionalization at the time. I thought it was a great idea. This could be a great idea, but we don't know. That's my opinion. As of tonight, I wouldn't have nearly enough information
So-
to vote on that.
Well, can I,
so-
sorry,
Go ahead, Joe.
what is the answer to that question?
Regionalization is quite different from a tuition agreement. With a tuition agreement, it is basically you're paying X amount to this town and the kids go over there, and there's still a lot of costs that the town bears. Special education being one of them. That's not gonna go away. And there's no guarantee that all students would go to this tuition agreement, and because kids will still be able to school choice elsewhere. Beyond that, because we don't even know the cost of that yet, because we don't know what Quabog would say per student. As a town, we lose complete autonomy, and we would be disenfranchised from any say in how the money is spent in that district. We wouldn't have any seats on that school committee, which would have been a difference with regionalization. There would have been representation on the committee.
One of the reasons we went to Quabog was equal number of seats per town.
So we would have an equal voice with the other towns in the district. With the tuition agreement, there's no representation on the committee. And with a 3-year contract, there's, as Mr. Duff presented to his school committee, there would be a cost increase year over year within that contract. So it's not just a flat rate for 3 years either. And on top of that, students that are already school choice into that district, once they hit, I believe it's grade 7, I guess I'm assuming 7 through 12 is what's on the table here. If you did 7 through 12, the kids that are already school choice to Quabog presently would be grandfathered into that agreement. So the amount that we're paying for them to be school choice down there, they would be raised up to that new
I don't
price
believe that's
point.
No,
accurate.
they
That
wouldn't.
is not accurate.
They
Stephen
would-
Duff
they
said
would-
that was actually not true.
They would stay at what they're choiced in with. Sheila?
Could I just make a couple points? The total expenditure per student, according to DESI in FY '22, in North Brookfield was $18,122. The proposed rate is 11.5 for tuition, and they'd go up 2 to 3% each year. Special ed students, the SPED director would be part of the special ed team for any NB students. School committee representation, they're willing to put an ex officio member, meaning you can communicate, you can participate in conversations, but you can't vote. Anyone that school choices from any grade stays school choice until they graduate. That was from DESI. So if your child goes in 2nd grade, when they hit 7 through 12, they are still considered school choice. SPED costs would be done as they are with school choice with SPED increments at the end of the year. That's the information I got. For funding, your Title I grant, 240, small regional schools, rural schools stays with North Brookfield. Chapter 70 stays with North Brookfield. The ones you'd be looking at would be the 1-8, Project Lead the Way, but Quabog does have those. The scholarships for the seniors. You would try to reach out to the originators. If you couldn't, it would be up to the school committee to vote to transfer those to Quabog for North Brookfield students.
And school choice tuition is $5,000, correct?
Plus if there's any sped increments, but that's not always true with, if they go to TECA, an online academy, it's a little more.
Sheila, do you have any of the information from those schools that currently have those deals, what their budgets are for K through 6?
I have not gotten that far.
I did a little bit of research on that, in rough research, and this is not gonna be like a cash windfall for the town.
No.
Yeah, so I wanna make that clear, I mean,
We're not looking at it as a cash flow.
and I understand, I'm just saying that in front of the finance committee, just so, because I have a feeling that there's some people that think that, you know, there's gonna be millions of dollars back in there. I think it's gonna be very similar, but if it would benefit, that's why I think we need a study to see if it is gonna be something
Well,
beneficial.
let's start with something we can all talk about and somewhat agree on, okay? Which is, what's the quality for the kid? Right? What's the education? If we were okay with regionalization, if we looked at the school and we said, hey, well, you know what? This is a place where I would send my kid. Right? Because I'm assuming when you're on the regionalization committee and you're evaluating the school, I mean, that's the thought process, right? Would I send my kid to this school? Do I think that the kids in North Brookfield are gonna be served well at this school system? And I guess, you know, and I've asked this question, if the school committee, and I'm not, the question's out there, and that's kind of what I'm kind of driving, trying to get an answer of the questions that I hear from a lot of people. Is that if the school committee was okay with regionalizing with Quabog, that the tuition out, even if there's no money saved, nothing, other than a contract that says, here's the amount, and that contract says there's a 2 to 3% increase next year, and maybe a 2 to 3% increase the year after that, okay? That is a controlled cost. That is a cost that we can count on, as opposed to, say, a spreadsheet. And if we say that, okay, if we can understand the cost going forward, and the child is going to get an education that we're comfortable with, then by and large, I'm assuming that the child's experience is the same. Whether we're regionalized or whether we're tuitioning out. That child, when he goes in the bus and it goes off to school, doesn't know the difference. Right? But we've got a contract that says, here are the costs, here's what they're going to be. And I guess there are folks here that are saying this, and then there are folks in another group that say, we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. And there's still that question as to, well, come January, the question was asked. Right? And here we are in May. And now we're saying, well, it's too late. It's too late. It's too late for next year. And some of us are having a hard time reckoning that if the question was asked in January, and you know, here we are in May, and the only numbers we have are from the town accountant, which, you know, you'd like to think that they would happen a different way. Well, there's a good reason for that. And I guess if there's one question, is what is the reason for that?
Well, so, first of all, question being asked in January is a very vague term. There have been 2 informational meetings. I have not been able to attend either one. Second one I wasn't invited to, I didn't get an invite. First one, I received an invite from the town at 11 a.m. that there was a 2 o'clock Zoom meeting that afternoon. I was at work. I could not pull away from work to attend that meeting. So, in the meantime, I looked into what that involves. What does tuitioning out involve? There's actually not a great amount of information on DESE's website as far as tuitioning out. There's lists of towns that have done it, I spoke with a woman who has been on the school committee in Otis for years, and they've never had a high school. And they're a regional district because there are two elementary school, there are two towns that make an elementary school, and then they tuition out to two different high schools in the Berkshires that they send. One's Lee and one's the other one, Berkshire Mountain School or something like that. It hasn't necessarily solved their problems, but they never really had that. So that's the only perspective I've been able to actually speak with as far as finding out. We spoke with our school council just to make sure what the legal stuff involved here is. And he said it seems unlikely they could get it done this year because there has to be a contract, there has to be an agreement with the contract, and then DESI's commissioner has to approve that contract for the tuitioning out. And then we have to renegotiate every 3 years. So that's a process, but just getting that contract done, I mean, I think the last 2 years of the regionalization committee were just contract discussions over that. Now, this is ostensibly a simpler contract to get done, which would be my hope. But there's also, in speaking with my field coordinator for the school committee, the Mass School Committees, she said there's rules as far as when the state has a deadline for when these things need to be made, these decisions need to be made. So if we got it done now, we could meet that deadline and get it for next year, that sort of stuff.
Okay.
These are the conversations I've been having, because I haven't been at these meetings.
Yeah.
Also, we don't have anything to even look at right now in writing. I'm hearing 11,005, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that written down.
That's my
I don't know
question,
what,
but
we don't have
that's-
anything to
but that's my
debate until we
question.
see
But
that.
that's my question, is that the informational session, I'm sorry.
It's not even about the information
No,
session.
but the informational session was not brought on by the school committee.
No.
So again, I'm going to get to my question. My question was, if in January, the question was posed to the school committee.
What was the
It
first
was-
informational session?
First informational session, I think, was March.
The
Okay,
superintendent was approached in January. If he didn't tell the
It was-
school committee, that's on him.
There was a phone call, no.
Yeah.
There was
So-
a phone
so-
call to our superintendent from the other superintendent, and it was a brief phone call, and it was after we had already met as a committee, and the suggestion had been made that we look into it, and we said, we don't like that idea right now, let's move forward,
So you
and
shot it down.
we didn't,
All right.
it wasn't shot down, we don't,
Yeah,
we
you just
didn't want
said, we don't like this idea right now,
Yeah,
shot it
yeah,
down.
Please.
I'm sorry. this is
I'm glad you're putting words in my mouth. So,
I repeated your words, John.
so we didn't like the idea at that point, and that was, it was a very brief thing in committee, and that was it. And based on that, Mr. McCormick relayed, we're not interested right now, and that was it. And that wasn't even a formal, that wasn't like an email, it was just a brief informal phone call. There's nothing, it's not anything binding whatsoever. So,
Never had the best.
so from there on, it
I think
was,
someone has a question over there.
let's move on and work with the budget and, you know, try to move forward as a school. And
What part of it didn't you like?
well, the fact that we voted as a committee in favor of regionalization, and I believe it was a unanimous vote that we were in favor of it, and then the same night, they voted no, and a pretty hard no, against accepting us for regionalization. So, you know, it's like, why would you all of a sudden want, you know, why would they want us now? And if we weren't good enough then, why now?
Did
And
anyone else?
so-
that?
So
So there,
hold on,
no,
everybody.
so that was in the air, and that's kind of like, you know, why would we want to all of a sudden say, you know, just jump on it right then and there? Because I think even if we had started the process then, we still wouldn't be anywhere, it still wouldn't have been in time for this year. You know, that's the thing, because there's, with all the negotiations and contracts and everything, even if we had started talking about it then, the deadline for the state to have received this and signed off on it for their budget purposes.
On a tuition
in the
agreement.
past. Because, and
On a tuition agreement, correct?
for a tuition agreement, yeah,
Okay.
if we had already, if everything had happened like super quickly, everything was somehow miraculously super fast and golden very quickly, the state would still need to say, DESI would have to sign off on it, but then from DESI, the numbers have to be transferred to the state because, as far as I understand, when they vote on their budget, they need to have the numbers in way up front for them to work into their budget for each district. So, I think by the time any of that had actually washed out, we would have already missed that deadline anyway. So,
So-
the talk of this being done in a fast manner, I think is,
None of that is
So,
true.
Michelle, please.
I'm sorry, it's not true. How many times are we gonna listen to people say things that aren't true and accept it as the truth?
because we were in discussion with lawyers that are familiar with these types of arrangements in other districts.
All right, so we knew regionalization wasn't gonna go through at some point, right? When was the vote?
I think that was in January, wasn't it?
The regionalization vote?
So much has happened.
When Quabog voted and they didn't vote us?
Yeah, it was the same night that we voted, so it was like,
December.
Okay. So, and I know Mr. McCormick and I had a discussion about halfway through the regionalization process. And we discussed what would happen if the regionalization process didn't work. And I asked him if he was working on other options. And he said, yes. I don't know what those options were. I have no idea what they were. We didn't talk about that. I just asked him if he had other options in mind. Now, he did bring up at some point, December, January, an override discussion. He brought up the override at a department head meeting. And as has been noted, we don't think we can afford it. All right, but what are other options? Okay, so a tuition agreement with any town is an option. Doesn't have to be Quabog, doesn't have to be anybody else. Could be David Prouty, could be Quabbin. But the fact remains, to the question that people keep asking is, why hasn't the school committee actually discussed it? You've talked about it at your meetings and told everybody how big a bad idea it is. And you've said things about the selectmen wanting to crush the schools. But we want what's best for the kids. And we can't afford an override. So what are we going to do? And why haven't you talked about it? It's your job.
Because we needed information.
Get the information.
That's what I've been doing, Jason.
When
I'm
you-
not doing
you-
anything. I'm up late at night looking up this sort of stuff so that I can try to bring that to a discussion. I don't have the
people that know.
information, and I can't provide a thoughtful conversation
Have you
about it.
talked to other school
When I-
districts?
Yes,
About
I
what
just
is-
said I talked to other school districts. I haven't called up Quabbin and said, hey, Quabbin, what would it look like if we did a tuition agreement?
Have you
I had
talked to our
find out
town
what the
accountant about our
process
town
was.
budget?
No, she sent me some emails about what it looks like. I know the situation. I'm not unaware of the situation. I'm aware of the school budget. I'm aware of the town budget. I'm aware that tuition out is on the table as far as a possible solution. I need to know what that entails before I can make an educated vote on it. And I know there were these meetings with Quabog, and
So when has the school committee talked about it?
it hasn't been brought up for discussion yet.
Why?
John and I have talked on several occasions about that.
You can't find the answers to questions. You don't know what the questions are.
That's why I was reaching out to our attorney, the Massachusetts Association of School Committees to try to find out who I can talk to.
When,
That's what I've been playing phone tag with people
when
around
we
the
have-
state to find out what's going on.
when we have issues that we don't understand, we talk about them to find out what the questions that we all have are. And then we discuss it in a meeting,
Yeah,
and we move on.
Yeah.
You haven't done that.
I tried to bring up for discussion the last school committee meeting I was at, and I was shut down hard. I wasn't treated very well. I tried to bring up We should be looking at this, we should be looking at this by, again, you're not gonna like this, but I think we should look at it. I
We
said
are
time and
looking,
time
we
again.
are looking at it, that's the thing, is
You
I'm
wouldn't discuss it
trying
that
to find
night.
out what's, because I didn't have anything to discuss, Ralph. And
You
now
weren't
you're not on
willing
the
to
school
listen
committee.
either.
We've got two new members
You
that I
weren't
need to,
you
I need
weren't
to try
willing
to help.
listen either.
along.
Because I was talking about facts that were brought up at the meeting.
You brought it up
and
at the
couldn't
very
make
end of the
it.
meeting, and it was
Meetings
not
That
are
on
was
the
one
agenda.
thing, there was
So-
several things I brought up at that meeting.
So we have a meeting on Monday, right?
Yes, we do.
And this is on the agenda for that meeting. That's what we've been building up towards. I didn't realize we were gonna have this joint meeting tonight. So I tried to scramble to get as much information as I could. And we are working on it. It's not off the table. It's not something that's not being discussed. We have a lot of other things we gotta do. Even if we regionalized, we would still have to get through the next school year, because the regionalization wouldn't have happened this school year.
A tuition agreement could have happened.
Not from what I'm being told.
Well,
If what you're being told is different than what I'm being told, then there's nothing that I can do about that. I could talk to your source of information and find out where the disconnect is between what I'm hearing from everyone that I'm supposed to call if I have a question.
it
And
all
who
revolves
is
around
doing
votes
that?
of the school committees.
But we don't have anything to vote on.
You could vote on pursuing a tuition agreement, and then you could talk to people who might be interested. Because we have to approach whoever it is in order to make it happen.
Well,
We can go out and say, all right, we're looking for someone to tuition with. You know, Quabbin, Quabog, Bay Path, whoever. And say, what do you got? And talk to them.
Yep.
But you have to make you have to vote to actually pursue it in order to gain all the information necessary.
Okay.
Kathy?
We first discussed this at the FinCom meeting on March 13th when the school board was here. It was brought up at that meeting. I have the minutes of the meeting. And the sentence says, after a very lengthy conversation regarding the pros and cons of this offer and how to proceed, Mr. Magario said that this would be discussed at the next school board meeting. We went to that school board meeting, Mr. Magario, and it was not brought up for discussion at that school board meeting.
okay.
I guess, Tim, you know you're an extremely highly respected person in this community. And so far at this table, we've heard what you've done. The phone calls that you've made, the research that you've done. And I guess the hard thing to understand is there's a committee. And there's a team. And I guess, why isn't the team working on it?
Well, I've been working with John, but I talk to John. When I find things, I communicate with him, so.
And I get that.
Because he's the chair, so I have to.
No, and I understand that,
Yeah.
but when you've got a team to work on an issue or a problem, or research, and the questions that, did the committee vote on it? Did the committee discuss it? And, we come back to, well, Tim did this, and Tim did that, and Tim, and it's great, but it shouldn't all be on your shoulders. It's not all on you.
I've taken that on. I asked John before I pursue this stuff, just to make sure that he knows what I'm doing. And I'm trying to find this information so that we can have a reasonable discussion at a committee.
It's a big topic for one person.
Well, he went to the informational sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you understand, do you understand what I'm saying? And I guess that's,
And we have two new members now that can be brought into this. That's the thing, is we haven't, committee wasn't running for reelection. We're gonna reshuffle the committee anyways at the next meeting. And I've just been getting as much info as I can so that we can have a reasonable conversation about it. The hope was that we would have a meeting prior to having this meeting so that we could bring a little more and have a better conversation. This is not productive, what we're doing
We had
right
hoped
now.
for more meetings too, but they didn't happen.
Well, here's another piece, is that we're in the midst of contract negotiations with the teachers, okay? And to, just the idea of tuitioning is, I mean, that's a huge impact on the teaching staff. You're talking about the elimination of those grades, and you're eliminating positions. That's a grave concern to the teachers' union. And we're in the midst of negotiations. And to have that thrown in was counterproductive. And to have the school committee, on one hand, trying to bargain in good faith and have a contract that was fair and equitable to the both for the town and for the teachers, but on the other side, you know, be two-faced and talk about eliminating their positions. That's not a good faith negotiation. And that's, to be honest, that's part of why it was not brought up in committee, because it's not something we wanted to consider at the time.
Because of the teacher negotiations?
For propriety's sake. Because I'm not gonna be called a liar in the long term, you know, by saying, oh, here's a great contract, and then, you know, turn around and do something different. It's not fair.
Now you're faced with cutting.
Yeah, that's what we're left with, is cutting from the school. And it's not palatable. Nothing about this is palatable whatsoever.
Tara?
Can I ask why the school committee only meets once a month? It's 52% of our budget for the town. Wouldn't it be better to meet more often, especially when there's so much going on?
Budget time.
Never mind.
Michelle?
How long is this contract for that we're signing with these teachers?
It's a 3-year contract.
So what you're saying essentially is you're willing to go into a 3-year contract, but next year you're willing to talk about a tuition agreement, which would still impact that contract, no? Or are we just gonna table it for 3 years until there's another contract negotiation and say, no, we're gonna talk about other options besides teachers? I don't understand where the good time is to have the conversation if we're promising them jobs for 3 years and then a year from now, they don't have jobs.
That's not the case. Part of the contract discussion involved what would happen if there was tuitioning out.
I can't hear Mr. Canada.
Part of the contract negotiation involved what would happen if there was tuitioning out.
So now I'm really confused.
Has the
Well-
teachers agreed to the contract?
In principle, yes.
So if the teacher, if part of the negotiation included tuitioning out, why would that hinder talking about tuitioning out? And I
No,
apologize,
no,
I'm a
it's-
manufacturing guy, right? I look at how many employees I have and I deal with salaries, but I also look at the business level.
So,
right? And
well, I'm looking at the negotiated contract discussions and what we can actually say here at this table.
Okay, okay.
So, because right now, there is a agreement, there is not a contract.
Jason?
Chat.
You talk about it, the state has a deadline. What is the next deadline? When, if we want to get this going next year, when do we have to have the ink
I
dry?
believe it is October, she was checking on it.
Okay,
Yes,
that's an important date.
yes.
So you're planning on talking about it on Monday?
Yep.
So, for your perspective, the tuitioning agreement, just for the sake of discussion, couldn't have happened this year.
That's everything that I was told.
So,
It's not
so
possible.
the tuitioning agreement, from your perspective, couldn't happen this year. So we're left with really two options, right? We're left with an override option, and we're left with a net school spending option, right? Because how much does that cut from the budget, Sheila, do you know? Net school spending?
Yeah, based on my current figures, it was 1,023,000.
So we have one or the other. And according to what I've heard in school committee meetings and seen in letters, you're looking at massive cuts to the elementary school. Is that correct?
Not yet. Well, we're looking at massive cuts to possibly everything. We need to have a we need to have a conversation about that.
Right.
That's the thing. We have already cut 377. Now we have to get into the weeds and go through line by line, which Mr. McCormick's been working on, to present to us what the other impacts are, that we can eliminate programs and eliminate costs and get down to that number.
So just so you know, according to DESI, and this is from a discussion with Michelle Griffin at DESI, the deadline was this coming Monday, the 19th, to get the information to DESI so they could vote on it in June for next year. That's the deadline, and that's according to DESI. If by some miraculous stroke of luck, you decided tonight to pursue an agreement and vote on it, closing the high school next year, if you voted on that Monday, they'd give us wiggle room because they know what our budget is, and they want us to regionalize with people. And a tuition agreement would be a lead-in to that. And what you would do is you'd sign that 3-year contract with the understanding that we would be negotiating during that 3 years for regionalization.
I think that's one of the things we'd have to clear up in talking to Superintendent Duff, because he didn't mention that, he mentioned it at the meeting here, but he didn't mention it at their meeting. I didn't hear it, at least I watched their next meeting. He didn't say that this would be a lead-in to regionalization. He made it sound like this would be, the going forward for them, because there was a lot of, their concerns too were all around the special ed costs.
Right, but that's part of the discussion.
Exactly, right, but that
Okay.
would have to be discussed, you can't just assume.
Exactly, it would be with the understanding that we'd be working towards an end goal.
I get that, I just don't know that they're
So,
of the same opinion.
so anyway, in theory, it could still be pulled off this year. Whether you believe it or not, it could be. So that being said, it's getting on 7:30. Does anybody else have anything to add? Mrs. Hanson?
Yes, from my perspective, as a town resident and as a parent who educated their children here in North Brookfield and at Bay Path, and working at the school, in the middle school as a para, I am very discouraged every time I hear about what we don't have, because I see what our kids do have in North Brookfield. And every single time you say out loud what we don't have, you're discounting those things that we do have, that we give our kids, that our kids benefit from, and that go on to be productive members. out in they go to the colleges they want to go to, they pursue careers. We have done a good job with the students, educating them with what we're given. And I know that when we were talking about regionalization several years ago, all I heard from parents that I knew was, we're gonna regionalize, let's go anyway. Let's get there ahead of the game. And we lost a great amount of students because of the talk at the very beginning of regionalization. And the second year, we also lost a great amount of students, which really hurt our school when we were at the beginning of talks of regionalization that did not happen. So now, when I watch the meetings on YouTube, because I cannot attend all of them, and I hear, choice out is the best option for our kids, choice out, choice out, choice out. And I think about those kids that I see as middle schoolers go through and then graduate, and then I see them afterwards and have conversations with them about how they benefited from their education in North Brookfield. I don't think we need to give up on our school so easily. I live in town, I pay taxes, and I believe in education. And it's always worth the money to me. And it's disheartening to say that now we should go to Quabog and they're welcoming us with open arms. It's really hard to hear that. When I know a benefit of our school right here, who as a freshman was invited to do a research project that only juniors and seniors are invited to do. And she graduated from North Brookfield. And I hear about all the other kids. You know what? I know we don't have everything that the bigger schools have. We don't have every sport. We don't have every elective. But what we do have means a lot to the kids that are there. So I just wish we wouldn't give up on North Brookfield. I feel like it's so important to have a school in town. To believe in them, you have to actually speak it out loud that you believe in them and convince people that it's worth educating them here.
So
we don't hear that enough to convince parents that our school is good enough. All we hear is what they're gonna get somewhere else. I don't have any solutions, no. You are the elected body to come up with solutions. But I believe in our school, and I believe in the education that our kids are getting there is a good one, and it's a solid one.
Ma'am, ma'am, I'd like to speak to that. I took a tour of the school. Mr. Magario and Mr. McCormick took me for a tour of the school this morning. And I will say that it was quite impressive. I've gone to many factories and companies to evaluate how they're doing, whether they're worth investing in, whether they're worth buying. And you, over time, you learn how to walk into a place and recognize something that's falling apart. And that certainly is not what I saw this morning. What I saw was a clean, vibrant school. I saw students who were busy, who were happy. I saw faculty and teachers who were doing what they clearly love to do. I saw innovative pathways. I saw some pretty impressive programs that I never would have thought North Brookfield would have. And to be quite frank, it was heart-wrenching. But that's not really the problem here. The problem really is it sustainable for the town? It's sustainability. You know, it's not an easy decision, and it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be hard. But to say we can't talk about it, I can't disagree more with that. We have to talk. That was the whole point of having this tonight. At least for me. Because it didn't seem like talking was happening. For whatever reason. And we could spend all night pointing fingers, and we could say, well, you know, this side and that side, and quite frankly, I've been selectman for 9 days. And I don't know any sides. I ain't been involved in it long enough. But to say we can't talk about it because of fear is foolish. It's destructive. We have to talk about it. It's the reason we're here now. What happens in 10 years? We don't know, because we're not talking about it. We see a budget that's grown exponentially year after year after year, trying to get through the next year. Just from one year to the next year to the next year. And granted, the regionalization, you know, from what I understand, it was a massive effort. A lot of time, a lot of energy put into it. But these conversations have to happen. These options need to be talked about. Regionalization needs to be talked about. Tuitioning out needs to be talked about. The same as an override. And the same as net school spending. It has to be talked about. We can't be afraid of it. And if folks are leaving the school system because we're talking about it, then shame on the parents. My wife and I, you know, well, my wife, credit to her, when my daughter was growing up, she did the research. She went out. She looked. She asked questions. And if parents aren't doing that and they're just responding to what they're seeing on social media, shame on them. Shame on them. Because we have to talk about this.
I want to make one point. Good, you made several good points there, Jamie, and I agree with everything you said. I just want to throw one thing out. When we sat up here for candidates night, I said that I make decisions analytically and data-based. I don't base my decisions on emotions. I totally appreciate the emotional attachment to a small town school. I have that to where I came from. And it's hard to make decisions. It's hard to make hard decisions. However, if we look at just a couple of numbers that have really just jump out, Sheila shared with us what we spend right now per student and what it would cost for us to tuition out. It's like $7,000 per student. Savings. It would go up 2 or 3% per year. That's what she shared with us. And the school choice students would stay the same. It has to be part of the discussion. It's part of, that's not an option. Quaba, if we can't make this deadline, we darn well better do something by the next one. And if Quabog's not the answer, then we gotta find another, there has to be another solution. At least consider it as an option. Quabog, this is what they have to offer our students that, for whatever reasons, all the reasons, we can all come up with them, we can't afford to have a CNA program. Phlebotomy, ER tech, I wrote down EKG tech, Fire Academy, EMT. Those are great programs for kids. In addition, they offer 15 AP courses. We have one. And that's not a knock on us, it's the way it is. They have honors courses, they're preparing kids too. That's not a majorly big school there. It's not a huge school. Our kids would like it there, they'd fit in right there. You can ask East Brookfield when they went in with Spencer. They're not left alone. They don't have their own school. New Braintree doesn't have a school. Hardwick doesn't have a school. They don't have high schools. Brookfield doesn't have a high school, but they feel totally welcome in Tantascwa. They get all the services they need in addition to all the courses that they can even think about. I don't think we should be thinking for our kids. I think should be thinking about them and about our future and being able to afford giving them the best education we can.
All right. Tara?
Oh, crap. Oh! No, there's not gonna be any savings. We know that. But what is being spent in the high school could be moved over, a lot of it, to the elementary school to add programs, add your arts and your extracurricular and all of that. And Ralph, that was a wonderful statement, thank you.
I'd like to throw in an item there. If we are no longer a K through 12 district, we lose funding allotted for K through 12 districts. And so
John,
the
can you
element,
speak up a little bit, please? Can't hear you back here.
usually I'm too loud. There's funding for K through 12 districts, and if we are no longer a K through 12 district, we will lose some of that funding, and we would have to seek other funding for the elementary school.
What funding is that?
I believe it's under Chapter 70. It's specifically for K through 12. I might be wrong there, I don't know. Is it Chapter 70?
I don't think that's
So,
accurate, because
okay.
the tuition costs would go towards net school spending.
Another consideration with the high school is that we have the 6th grade over there, because we were trying to improve, the social transition between the elementary school age into middle school and into high school. And moving 6th grade over, we've had an improvement in student integration. And so moving the 6th grade back over to the elementary school, we would need to, there'd be two new teachers back at the elementary school. So that's something else to be considered with that. And yeah, just the way our school has been broken out compared to other districts. Jamie and I, we had actually discussed that today, was the transition of the 6th grade to the junior, senior high school, and what a benefit that's been. But these are all considerations to be had.
Okay, so where do we go from here? Anybody? Do we pursue a override? Do we pursue net school spending? Do we pursue a tuition agreement? What do we do? Because we're going to cut from the town, various departments in town, as much as we possibly can. It's going to destroy them, but, you know, the school's the big number.
So I just, in 5 years, let's say 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, in the future, you know, we are I think everybody agrees that we want to do what's best for the students in our town, and I think that's, you know, out there. I don't think anybody disagrees with that part. I think the general consensus is that the financial part of it would be somewhat similar, but there'd be potentially a lot more benefits to the kids, right? I think that's, so saying that.
Controlled cost.
Well, there is and there isn't. I mean, but we have the 2%, but then we have special ed, which is, you can't, that's above and beyond. So that's the one, you know, the issue we have now is special ed funding. That's still gonna be an issue. So I guess what I'm getting at is, in 5 years, is this gonna be a budget conversation every year, even just to do the K through 6, to fund the K through 6? Like, if we're looking at the same amount of money, you know.
We're still required for net school spending.
Right.
So that would all go to, well, most of it would probably go to the elementary school. Right, wouldn't it?
What did you just say?
Aren't we still required to pay net school spending?
We're still required to pay net school spending, but any expense that comes from the tuitioning is part of net school spending,
Okay.
as is school choice out, benefits, and all the other things, you know, that go into educating the charter school health benefits. That's all towards net school spending. The only piece that is not part of net school spending is transportation. State law requires we provide the transportation, but that's not a cut to net school spending.
Okay.
The numbers you have, Sheila. First year is a wash.
Excuse me?
The numbers that you have,
The numbers that I have would leave us an estimate of 300,000 to the good. But
first year.
first year, and that is with one-time payouts, unemployment contract buyouts.
Second year.
Second year, I have not gotten that far.
She has other work to do.
Are there costs that first year that aren't in the second year?
Yeah, there'd be about 600,000.
So there's $600,000 of reduced costs the second year.
But you'd have to also take into consideration the percentage increase to the tuition rate.
The 2 to 3%
Yeah.
based on whatever the contract is.
Yes.
And the thing that you don't really ever know is the special ed cost, because,
Yeah.
because if somebody comes into the district, that's all I was getting at, is if we're at the same operating number between K through 6 budget standalone and 7 through 12 tuition out, is this conversation at this table needing $1.2 million every year still going, are we still gonna be in the same position? We're not gaining any revenue, we don't wanna raise taxes, everybody's saying, so are we still gonna be at that same position?
It all depends on whether the legislators do get it to 100% reimbursement with the circuit breaker, in which they talk about it, and they have now come up with an agreement. But yes, no matter where it is, we're always going
Right.
to have special ed, right? That does not go away, and it's always going to be a burden, or shouldn't use word burden, but it will always
impact.
be.
That's always gonna be an impact.
Sheila?
I just want to point out, when I was doing these numbers, I didn't touch the special education budget as it is. That was not taken into consideration. I looked at the high school budget, athletic budget and athletic transportation, and then some of the buildings and grounds, oil, electricity, custodial staff. That's all. So everything else was still intact, and that's just in the comparison that I had here.
So that didn't include the salaries of the teachers and whoever else works in that building?
In the high school, yes.
Yeah,
In the
in that
elementary
building,
school, no.
Even using, in considering that, we're still around 300,000 saving without paying?
And that was with adding back, I put in 180,000 for 2 sixth grade teachers, just a ballpark.
Okay.
Well, I do think just the proper way to do it is, if you decide to look at it, you almost have to put out an RFP for proposals from other schools.
Yeah, right.
And
Yep.
then look at it that way, to break it down. Unfortunately, the situation we're in for next year is dire.
That's basically why I said what I said at the beginning, is because I think next year, regardless of what we do long-term about choicing out, I think we're still in the same situation for next year. Not saying I'm for or against it as a committee, I have no idea what they think. I think it needs to be looked into. I don't know if I can make a motion right now, but if I can, I don't know if I can make a motion.
But we, as a
You've
committee,
been sworn.
since we have not yet formed as a committee, we can't vote.
Well, you actually can, you're still a chair and a vice chair with three other members, only 2 are present. You can actually vote on stuff.
What are we voting on?
I was gonna make a motion that the school committee starts looking into the possibility, long-term, of tuition out, with the caveat that we have to figure out next year either way. Like, we have to figure out next year, that's primary. So I don't know if that's making a motion to form a committee, or just doing it as the school committee. I don't know if we need a subcommittee. I honestly don't know the answers to that. I'm kind of fresh to the topic, so I don't know. I think it's something that enough people are talking about where it
We've been
does need to be looked
discussing,
into.
John and I talked about that the other day, is the
Yeah.
possibility of having, maybe not even a subcommittee, maybe more of a task force.
Yep.
Because you need other invested parties involved in this. Because if we're gonna vote to tuition out all the kids, we need to present where they're going, why they're going there, what the advantages are to that, and what the people are getting for their money. We need other voices besides just us.
Yeah.
We're elected, but there's also, they're not all our kids. So we need a more diverse set of voices to be involved in making the final decision. We make the final decision, but to contribute to that, there's a lot of work that needs to be done as far as putting out an RFP for something like that and finding out what our options are. Bus stop's pretty big for Quabbin here. You know, they might want the kids. So we gotta ask all interested parties.
And that's why I brought that up, is there was an article in, I think it was the Telegram the other day. Quabbin basically said, the first time in 10 years, they're gonna take in choice in students because their enrollment's dropping and they need more kids.
Is that what you said?
Wachusett.
Was it Wachusett? I'm sorry, yes, it was Wachusett, I apologize.
Quabbin's had half-page articles in the New Leader for a couple of times now looking for school choice. I know that Prouty has submitted a proposal to MIAA to have a cooperative, co-op soccer team and inviting North Brookfield students to play over there. So Prouty is another candidate to go along with what you were saying, to do the investigations.
They're all candidates. And again, the regionalization ship is still there,
Yep.
but it sailed 30 years ago, more than that, 40, 50 years ago. At one point, all the Brookfields were gonna be a region. If you go to the town museum, you can actually see the plans for the regional school of the Brookfields, and now everyone's in their own district. So we couldn't pull it together then, and North Brookfield's now the only one hanging on as its own independent district.
What?
There's a motion on the table.
Effectively, no one seconded it.
There's no second.
Do you want me to restate my motion in a more cohesive?
Well, it was kind of vague, and
I
you
agree.
asked if you could make one.
Kind of trailed
Well,
off.
we have a meeting on Monday.
Well, I was gonna make a motion that at that
You're more than
meeting,
welcome to write it out.
Yeah.
Nice, formal, fancy.
I was just looking to make this feel like it was productive at least.
No, it's productive. We know where people, where the town stands as far as, you know, what's available.
So what are we gonna do about this year's budget, this upcoming budget? There's really only two options left. Right?
I don't know enough about an override, if you
So,
could.
there's several things at play. First of all, we gotta go through what the cuts are. Obviously, we have to cut things. That's gonna have to happen. We gotta know what those are. And then, last year, between now and when the budget was finalized, more state money came through. All of a sudden, those offsets
Right.
changed.
I wanna-
We were up to the wire on things coming back in. And Mr. McCormick gets stuff from, you know, his connections at the State House and things like that. And we get a little jump on that. So there's still a lot of numbers at play as far as how this plays out before the end of the year.
MASC sent out an email back on the 9th, and it's an update email about the state budget. As far as Chapter 78, the initial Ways and Means proposal is up to 7.01 billion, and it's 25 million lower than the initial House proposal. That would be a per pupil aid increase of $150. Circuit breaker reimbursement, it's funded at $681.99 million, which is higher than both fiscal year '25 and the governor's proposed level, which is $7.31 million more than the initial House proposal. Regional school transportation is $3.4 million under the House proposal. And I think those are the major ones. And then rural school aid is funded at $16 million and matching the governor's level funded proposal. The initial House proposal was only $7.5 million. So there are still numbers. These are still preliminary because they haven't voted on it yet. So there are some numbers that will come in higher, I would assume, but yeah, hopefully.
How much time is left?
For what?
I think,
So we can sell.
July 1st.
Yeah.
Well, with the town meeting in June,
Right, June 13th.
so a month.
So there's always been like
Less than a month.
we get the numbers in after we get the budget voted on, and there's, numbers shift from the
Generally,
state.
the governor has their budget, and then the House, and then the Senate, and then they all talk, and we usually find out, the MASC and the superintendents, they all have people that like just camp out there at the State House for this time to kind of give us
Okay,
information.
so how, first time, new guy. It's May 14th.
Weak link, one word to say, right?
Better than
May
missing one.
14th. Budgets need to be, town meeting is
June 13th.
June 13th.
Have a public hearing.
You need a public hearing for
They,
the,
the school committee is supposed to have
Yeah.
a public hearing and present their budget to the townspeople at a public hearing before town meeting.
in the state usually, that number usually comes out.
Whenever.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Not-
But that's why
not-
we
Yeah, there's-
moved the
there's no
annual
time.
to
Yeah, no,
June
no.
It'll
because
be after the town meeting,
Yeah.
so no matter what happens.
I'm sorry, Sheila, what?
and that's why we moved the annual town meeting to June, because that's where you were finding the numbers that were coming out. Was in
Typically
June.
around that time?
Yep.
Could that have been later?
They can.
Yeah.
Well, what could change is school choice, and then we'd be looking at the special town meeting. Anything would be a special town meeting in November for any changes. It's what we've done in the past.
The state says is calling for a $45,000 increase to Chapter 70, so that's not gonna really change too much from this point out. It may slightly change, but that's where it's at. The Senate and the House both are having $45,000 for North Brookfield over what the governor's budget was initially.
So you're kind of expecting that's where it's gonna land?
Yeah, the big one that we don't know about right now, as John mentioned, is rural school aid, which was funded at $16 million the last couple of years. Our ask has been $60 million. They're coming in around $7.5 million. That's the projection right now, so that's a huge loss.
Don't you have 140 as an offset on that?
We do, but I'm saying that for next year, we got 120 this year, and we were looking for about the same for FY '26. If it goes to $7.5 million projected funds for next year, that's statewide for all the 65 or so districts that fall under that umbrella, we will receive much less than the 120 that we're projecting. The other piece that I received an email today from Senator Durant's aide was that they are still advocating for increase with circuit breaker. So right now, our projections, our budget for next year are at 75% for tuition and roughly 54% for transportation. They're advocating for at least 90% for tuition reimbursement, which has been talked about for several years. But that urgency is more this year because of the lesser amount for rural school aid, and really North Brookfield, like many other towns, has seen a constant decrease in the amount of Chapter 70 funds for the town. Going back to 2016, we're at 70%, we're close to 61% now. So that means the net school spending is going up every year. So the town has to produce more money to offset that cost. So that's kind of where we're at.
Thank you. So those are the deadlines we have. We got a town meeting on the 13th, and we need a public hearing from the school committee on their budget prior to the 13th. All right. Do you have anything else? John? Jen? Joe? Jamie, Ralph? Sheila? Anything else? Tim?
No.
All right, I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved.
in favor?
All those opposed?